Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Battling the Supply Chain. My name is Joshua Chananie. I'm a partner at Sachs LLP and head of the firm's manufacturing and distribution practice. I'm here today with my colleagues, Danny Kaplan, Principal, SMC Data Systems, the Honorable John Cosgrove, President of Atlantic Handling Systems, and the mad scientist himself, Sandy Vosk, President of Advantage Technology Solutions, Inc. I brought these folks together today to talk about some of the challenges that we've all been facing with respect to the supply chain and bring that industry knowledge to the forefront and discuss some of those challenges and discuss what businesses are doing to try and combat them. Today's agenda will touch on the critical impact factors of the industry, goals and objectives, the benefits of having an integrated ERP software and why that's critical to today's environment, and the benefits of having an ERP software with integrated warehouse management system. I'm going to turn it over to Sandy, who's going to take us through some of those critical impact factors.
Well, thank you, Josh, and thanks very much for inviting us here today. This really is an important subject. I don't think that we've ever seen a time this volatile, and with everything going on, I truly believe one of the most critical factors in our industry especially is hiring and retaining talent. Ergo the term, the Great Resignation. And John and I were actually at an event last week speaking with Beth Rooney, who's now the director of the Port Authority in New York and New Jersey, was talking about there's no longer a peak, holiday peak. It's all the time peak. And therefore, that's putting even more pressures on us. The pandemic, although we go through waves, is not over. And what's going on in China is now going to have significant negative ripples across the supply chain industry, especially with more cost increases, feeding inflationary pressures, which we're already hurting from, not just merely at the pump, but across the board in America. These are creating tremendous supply chain challenges for everyone. How to order stuff, how to store stuff, how to ship stuff, and how to make money doing so. If you're importing, exporting, the costs are exorbitant. If you're importing from Asia, 5 to 6 times what it was a few years ago, and you have to try and make up for these additional costs somehow in your company. The volatility and uncertainty, I believe, is the new normal. Look what we've been through the last few years, and every time we think we're at a pause, something else happens. So I just think this is it, and we have to learn how to live in this mode. And you cannot stand still. I posted something yesterday, a great quote. I hadn't even heard it before from Albert Einstein, that said, life is like a bicycle. You have to keep moving forward. And to do that, and if you're in manufacturing, distribution, logistics, it's about modernizing your operations, and that's about technology and automation. That's how you can increase productivity. That's how you can get your customers' products faster. And that's how you're going to satisfy your own people as well. So I truly believe this is the way forward.
Sandy, you brought up a great point. And this is what our customers are asking about, right? Because in the end, it's about profitability, right? I've got to create enough profit in my products. I've got to be able to create enough cash flow to sustain my operations. How do I, the question that we get is, how do I budget? How do I project? How am I going to know what my profitability is, let alone 6 months from now, a week from now, right? Expenses are changing. They go up, they go down, they go back up, they go up 3 times, 4 times, and I think from my standpoint, that's the challenge is how do I sell products today not knowing that I'm going to be able to fulfill the product for the cost that I've quoted? And I think I ask you guys, what kind of advice would you give to someone saying, how do I know from a cash need standpoint, where do I begin?
I know John wants to say something, and I want to hand it to him, but I just want to say one thing, which is really why we're here today. And fundamentally, you have to have what I call systems of record. QuickBooks, Excel, This is not a way to be able to do what you've just said. You have to have a strong platform, whether it's your ERP system, order management systems, warehouse management systems, etc. John, what's your thought on this?
Well, Josh, I think the biggest critical impact factor in all of this is exactly what you just said. I was at a client yesterday, and he was telling me that he actually packages caviar. He puts it in jars. And the problem he has is that in order to fulfill his orders, he's now going to have to order the jars, like a year and a half worth of the jars to get them in. So he has them, or else he's out of business. So, between the increase in with wages, the fact that you can't get people from the labor force, the supply chain, all of these things, the answer to this, of course, is the productivity has to be increased. That's the only way we're going to be able to become profitable, is to increase our productivity. And 66% of the people surveyed in a material handling magazine recently said that they have to automate. Now, automation is looked at in different ways by different people. Some people, it could be as simple as putting in a tape seal that can increase their productivity a little bit. But then other people are looking at, the European form, where in Europe, people have vacation for like 6 weeks at a time. So here we always threw people at problems. In Europe, they were always using automation. So we're going more and more to that. We're using high-speed pick, automatic storage and retrieval, vertical storage systems, a lot of different things, palletizers, sortation systems. But these are all things that your clients have to realize in order to get a return on investment. They have to see what's right for them. But we have to provide the intelligence for that. So Danny, what do you think a WMS can do to provide intelligence?
It allows you to keep track of your inventory, what's available in the warehouse after you allocate it for production for future orders. You might have 1 million product in stock, but you allocate 500,000 against production of future orders. You have to know when the next inventory come in, at what is your landed cost when you hit your warehouse. Not having the right landed cost will result in the product being sold below profit or very low cost profit. It's a very important factor people are missing today, because freight costs fluctuate. Container already up to like over $20,000. So you really have to know what the product costs you when it hits your warehouse.
And I just want to go back to another point, right? So, it's funny. I think a lot of times people look at labor and automation. So we've talked. I remember, John, 2 years ago when COVID first hit and we kind of came together for the first time, we said you have to embrace a couple things, right? E-commerce, right? Sandy, you were so high on that. It was basically e-commerce or death, if I remember. It was that strong of a point. Exactly.
It's a tsunami.
That's right. And John, I remember we said, if you don't embrace automation, again, it's almost like a death sentence, because I think we forecasted forward and we saw that this labor issue was going to be so problematic.
And Josh, we actually have a case study on that now, because we were involved with a company, the three of us, that didn't do what we said they should, and the end result is not good. It's death, right?
That's right.
However wise we were in predicting, what none of us could have predicted was COVID. And the impact of COVID has now maximized, further intensified, that's better language,
right,
the growth of e-commerce by 3-4 years. So this is, it is a tsunami that people are still not dealing with in ways. And in terms of it's a really powerful point. I firmly believe with full heart that we are not in a period like we were 15, 20 years ago, where technology was being justified to replace people's jobs. This is about how do you make up for the gaps in labor, and how do you keep up with customer demands, and how do you provide better tools for the new workforce that are technically oriented. And this is how they operate virtually or wherever they are. So it is about learning how to utilize technology and software and automation. That's where John and I really.
And you know, the problem is the supply chain issue is now across the board. It's not only in goods coming in that you're going to sell, it's also in the equipment we provide. You know, what used to be able to get in 2 months now takes 6 months. Some fork trucks that are on the market can't be delivered till the summer of 2023 right now. So even if you want to invest in that equipment, increase the productivity to help yourself, you may not even be able to get it because the supply chain issue is now across the board in all facets of the industry.
But go ahead, you want to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and you know, I'm thinking about another point that maybe isn't on here. That's something that I've come across, and that's diversification. And what I mean by that is, I've had companies who I work with come to me and say, we've had customers come to us asking us to open a secondary location because of the concern that if one location gets shut down, whether it be because COVID has ran rampant through the warehouse, they have trouble getting materials, that it now doesn't trickle down and affect the customers and doesn't disrupt business altogether. So in some cases, we have customers who are not even at full capacity in the warehouse here, but being asked to create a second location so that the customers themselves feel like they're not going to let them down either. So I thought that was interesting.
I think Danny can speak to multiple locations with a warehouse management system, right?
That's a very important factor of having multiple locations, knowing what each location is. Let's say, for example, Ohio location is short of inventory, but Wisconsin has it. So having real-time information of multiple locations with one system, you can use common carrier, FedEx or UPS, to ship it rather than transfer the inventory back and forth between warehouses like the olden days.
Back now, to pick up on what Danny said, it's about smart warehousing and shipping. You want to reduce the time and cost to ship because shipping's so expensive. So if somebody's on the West Coast and you can ship it from the West Coast, you want to ship it from the West Coast, not from the East Coast. So there's so much more that's going into the decision making today, going back to your original point. And, you know, when I hit resistance, like in warehouses, people don't want to use new technology. I'll ask a forklift operator, how would you feel doing that job with a pallet jack today instead of your forklift? Like, well, I can. Well, it's the same thing, right? You know, we're limited by the tools we have, and if we're taught to use better tools, we can get more done.
So it's funny, when we spoke on this panel last week with the Port Authority Director, Sandy and I, she spoke about the ergonomics. And, you know, when you start to talk about the labor shortage, you want to protect the employees you have now in the warehouse. So you want to make it more ergonomically friendly so that they're not really killing themselves or hurting themselves and lifting. And so there's a lot more automation coming out that can help in that respect.
Didn't you talk about some robotics or something you saw at Modex in that regard, right? Coming out of the truck?
Yeah, there's a way to offload trucks now with a conveyor that actually, it can go up and down and transfers from left to right, where they can actually just slide packages out of a container. But most packages that come in from overseas are not on pallets where they can take them out with a forklift. You have to pick them up and put them on a conveyor. Now they can ergonomically do that.
And I can't believe I'm about to ask this, but I think it touches things that each one of you had said, is that how much of this have we actually learned from Amazon and seeing their successes and how they run their business?
Well, you just read my mind, because as John was saying that, before you asked the question, you know, go back to your original point, is this about replacing labor? And it's no. And so during the pandemic, Amazon had to work and they couldn't put 4 people in a truck to unload, right? It's not safe. So what do? You use technology, automation, which now enabled them not to replace people, but to be able to get the work done with less people and unload those trucks at the speed they needed to.
They're the prime example of what we're trying to get at here. Because what they've done is they take the combination of automation and technology and have perfected it. I mean, they've gotten it down to where they can deliver, you know, they load vans as per streets. You know, it's like incredible. And you know, they bring it all to a last mile warehouse. They offload it, they sort it, and they put it into vans, not only by zip code, but by actual, you know, your next door neighbor's getting a package, it's on the same truck, and they've done that. They've perfected it. And
I know we want to move on, but just as a takeaway for the folks, you know, your constituents, I've run physical Amazon tours, but right now anyone could see the digital tour, and I encourage your folks to watch that, because they're not using drones and, you know, bleeding edge technology. They're using smart technology to move goods to the people ergonomically, just as John just said. It's smart, you know, and so there's great lessons to learn from that. You can't be Amazon, but you can certainly model things that they do well and go, hey, that's a great idea. How do I use that in my company?
And just one more comment on that. We used the word last week, pivot. You know, and I've done like 4 of these Amazon last mile warehouses. We've done installations in them, and all the conveyor, everything in the warehouse is on wheels. Everything moves, so they have the versatility to pivot and do what they need to do.
So some of the things you've said, John, it doesn't sound to me like it's very cost prohibitive, right? I think people hear the term automation, we think about Amazon. I'm a small business. How do I afford? How do I embrace? How do I even, you know, if you were giving advice, John, to me, I'm a small company. I want to embrace automation because I see it as the future for my business. Where do I start? How do I budget? You know, if you were just going to give some simple advice,
A lot
what would you say?
of companies here are small to mid-sized companies within our area. So what they should really do is start with some form of automation and build a master plan, and then say, okay, let's take a look at this. What's the lowest hanging fruit that we're going to get the biggest return on investment? And once we get done with that, let's take a look at going to something else. And as our business, you know, you have to be ready to be able to adapt and change. And you know, that's kind of what we try to do. We build a master plan for our customers. They may not buy a $3 million system, but they may buy a $250,000 piece of conveyor or sortation equipment that's going to help them to increase their productivity. And as it continues to increase their productivity, hopefully it helps them to increase their business, which then takes them to the next level.
If I could just say one thing.
Please, yeah.
You know, I really believe this to be true, that it's more challenging than ever because of not just what's going on in the world, but the pace of change. And, you know, what I see is a lot of software or automation providers that approach problems like the old carpenter with a hammer scenario, where the answer to every problem is a hammer and nail, and it's not. You know, so what I like to do is really meet with the executive and their team, the senior team, and really get a clear understanding as to who they are, what they do today, what they have today, and either what their pain is or what their objectives are. And that, believe it or not, the CEO may or may not have his finger on the pulse. The CFO may or may not have his finger on the pulse, or they may just all be measuring different pulses, right? And looking at it through a different lens. But really, to make a decision of this magnitude and to get the results they desire requires some outside expertise. People like Danny's expertise, or John's expertise, or my expertise. It's not something you want to just approach on your own. Can you? Yes. In the thought that you're saving some money, but more likely you're going to leave money on the table by not bringing in a trusted advisor.
Yeah, I think now more than ever, you really need to build a team of professionals around you, because you're right. You know, this day and age, you've got to be able to look at life outside the business with an open mind and really understand that every piece of your business is being affected. So just because you know your business inside the business very well doesn't necessarily mean that it translates to what's going on outside the